What's up, everyone? This is Lan here with another episode of Cheeseheadz Weekly. This is episode 40. Last week I said it was episode 40 as well. It was actually episode 39. Got a little bit ahead of myself there. We have just finished up with week 8, and the Packers lose again, this time 24-10 to the Minnesota Vikings at Lambeau Field. Another uninspiring performance on offense and also on defense for the most part as well. Just a rough day all the way around for the Packers, and I will dive into that a little bit. Before I get into that, though, there we have the Q&A and the polls on Spotify only, and that's been a lot of fun. If you could have answer the questions there and vote in the polls. That makes things a lot more fun, promote some discussion, which is fantastic. And last week, the question was, what are the Packers doing wrong on offense, or what can they do on offense to fix it? What are we doing wrong? Whatever. Something to that extent. And we had an answer: stop throwing it along the sidelines, deep downfield along the sidelines in the double coverage, basically. And yeah, good answer. That's one of many, but yes. Yeah, and I think that's certainly not a root thing or anything, but yeah, that's certainly one of the things that could be an issue. So yeah, I was texting Robin and Troy after this, after the game, and we talked a little bit. I might get into that, or just get some information kind of from that as part of my opinions, because some really good stuff as we were texting back and forth. That was a lot of fun. And it's great to have friends who can do that. And so if you send in a voice message, participate in those things, you have those kind of discussions with other Packers fans. It's a lot of fun. There is a link in the description to send in a voice message every episode on every platform. And next episode, if possible, I'm not going to promise anything, but I'm planning on trying to get a guest on the show to do a show on Jordan Love. We'll be halfway through the season at that point, and I'd like to do a little bit of a show, on what, kind of go back, look at the first, few games of the season, first half of the year, what we think about Jordan Love going forward, whether he is the real deal or not. So, I mentioned it last week. Just a reminder, send in those questions about Jordan Love, the Packers offense, things you want us to discuss along that line. Send in a voice message on those. That would be fantastic, and we can answer your questions in that show. The show is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and pretty much wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes are out every single Tuesday. Hit the bell icon on whatever platform you're using to be notified when a new episode comes out. You can tell your friends about the show. That would be great. Rate the show on Spotify and rate and review on Apple Podcasts as well. No ratings or reviews on Apple Podcasts, so it'd be great if we could see some of that. Also, you can follow the show on Instagram at cheeseheads_weekly. You can check out our website at greatcove.net/cheeseheads. And that is about it. Have not been posting much on Instagram. In fact, I haven't posted anything after that game. Yeah, I've been trying to not use Instagram too much. It does waste some time, but Yeah, and I have not put bold predictions out for 2 straight weeks. I mean, at this point, it's a bold prediction to say Packers win. In fact, it's so bold that I don't even think I would predict that. And then another bold prediction would be, score a touchdown in the first half. It's been 25 straight drives, 4 games now, I believe, without a touchdown in the first half. Last time was week 2 against the Atlanta Falcons. So actually, I guess that would be, um, 4 games. I think it's 4 games since that point because they had their bye week in there as well. So pretty much nothing's working at this point. There's not much to say. Other than that, before I do get into the Packers game too much, I mentioned last week that I want to talk about, or maybe I didn't mention last week, I'm not really sure. We have a lot of, fines going around for different penalties, some that aren't even flagged in game, and then after the game, a person gets hit with a fine. They're like, "What just happened?" I do not remember that play because it was not even flagged. They weren't even penalized for it. Um, so it's actually quite interesting here. Some of the numbers. The most, what we've seen the most of is like taunting, pretty much any unsportsmanlike conduct of some kind. Impermissible use of the helmet, we've seen that before. Hit on a defenseless player, roughing the passer, face mask, lots of different stuff like that. And fighting. Fights have definitely drew some fines, I guess you could say. Blindside block, low block. Yeah. There's a PED one, performance enhancing drugs. One happened to a Colts defensive tackle. And yeah, I'm actually trying to find here. Jacksonville and Indianapolis are by far the highest, have been hit with the most amount as far as fines go. The PED one was the big one there for the Colts. But I'm not seeing one here for the Jags. There's a 50,000 one. That was undisclosed. That's interesting. So yeah. There's a tripping, late hit, all kinds of random ones. And actually, a Saints quarterback, Jake Haener, got hit with a PED one as well. So wow, there's all kinds of stuff here. Oh, Cam Robinson, left tackle for the Jaguars, got hit with a PED one, a pretty substantial one. Those two, the Colts and Jaguars, are by far the highest. And that kind of ruins the graph then. The lowest, as far as I can tell, is Carolina. The Carolina Panthers have had the least amount of fines, so kudos to them. Packers have had 40 plus thousand dollars worth of fines for players. And just to highlight, if we look at the Packers, they have received 4 infractions. One was Rasul Douglas, unsportsmanlike conduct. That was against the Saints, an unnecessary roughness. An unnecessary roughness from Ben Sims, the tight end, also against the Saints. And Devondre Campbell had an unnecessary roughness in week 1. And same with Russell Douglas, another unnecessary roughness in week 1. So nothing too substantial there for the Packers. All of them came in week 1 and week 3. Which is actually, the Packers have got to be the most penalized teams. I'm actually going to look that up. Most penalized teams in the NFL. And let's see what we have here for those rankings. The Packers. I'm kind of confused here. Okay, yeah. Packers have been penalized the most in the NFL. The absolute most. And that is absolutely crazy. In their last game, they had a total of 11 penalties. I'm not even sure that was the first game that's happened to. The last 3, they have an average of 7 penalties a game. That's actually better than what they were before. That's better than what their overall average is, because their overall average is 7.4. It's worth noting they have these different stats here. At home, this is really interesting, actually. At home, they have been penalized a lot more at an average of 8.7 penalties a game. Their average away on the road, 6.5 penalties a game. Now in 2022, I want to look at those rankings here. But Green Bay. Looks like they were middle of the pack. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. They were 12th. Least the 12th. You could say 12th as in 12th fewest amount of penalties. So pretty much middle of the pack. Top half as far as penalties, in the good way. There's fewer penalties at an average of 5.2 penalties a game. So they weren't great last year. They certainly are not good at all this year. And it is not good. They are. The Bengals are the least penalized team. And Green Bay has been penalized a lot. And looking at some of these games, I'm thinking, well, the refs are really strict and just penalizing them a lot. But the Bengals at number 1 are penalized 4.4 times a game, which is not bad. So that's really rough. That's hurting the Packers. That's definitely one of the things that are hurting the Packers. What I wanted to talk about here was just the NFL cracking down on some of these fines. Them handing out suspensions a lot easier. Some people, especially players themselves, may be thinking that the NFL is being way too strict. If I had to give my take on it, I'd say that no, I don't think it's a bad thing that they're being too strict. Some of these things, it depends. I actually forget. It's too bad. I should have looked this up beforehand. There was someone who was suspended 4 games. A player, I do not remember who the player was. So they were originally suspended 4 games for something that was not, to be honest, maybe something that you would even be suspended for last year. I'm not sure. I forget what the offense was as well. They appealed that suspension, and they got let me see, Kareem Jackson, and if I can just look that up here real quick, that was the Broncos. That's when they played against the Packers, I believe. So Kareem Jackson. He's a cornerback for the Broncos, and he had an illegal tackle. That's what they're really cracking down on. Illegal tackle. It injured Luke Musgrave. I'm not sure if this is. I don't remember what the tackle is. They are trying to ban certain types of tackles, like what they call the hip drop tackle, maybe, where you just kind of drop your hips and just drag the player down. Things can fold under like ankles and stuff. Um, Actually, that's not how it happened to Luke Musgrave. I remember he just got hit really hard, and I guess the hit was too high. I don't remember. He got suspended 4 games for that. He appealed it. It was cut down to 2 games, which I think was probably good. I think 2 games is good. 4 is almost a little bit too many. Because, some players can hit just as hard as long as you're hitting at the right spot. Which I realize it's a big difference hitting someone really hard in the head and hitting someone really hard in the shoulder pads. But still, I like that was downgraded a little bit, and I'm sure that was because of the NFLPA, NFL Players Association. So yeah, I think it's good that the NFL is cracking down on it. If you remember, Deshaun Watson's suspension was, I don't even remember how long it was originally supposed to be. I feel kind of unprepared now. I keep thinking of things and then of examples, and then I don't remember the details. But it got downgraded to only 11 games. And after he appealed it or whatever, and I was a little bit unhappy. Deshaun Watson's situation, he should have been suspended for 2 years. Just to be honest, he should have been out of the NFL. If we're taking Colin Kaepernick out of the NFL for protesting the national anthem, which to be honest, I'm not a fan of Colin Kaepernick at all. Okay, that national anthem stuff and all the different things. I think maybe he's just washed as a player at this point because no team seems to want to have him, or maybe they don't want to deal with that the fact that he would be on their team, maybe distracting players. But yeah, I'm not. I think the NFL is doing well. I think to increase strictness to some extent, but I think maybe I think the main reason they're doing it is for player safety. At least some of this stuff, not as much behavior. And to be honest, it's not really going to change anything. Anyway, with them increasing the strictness, players are still probably not going to care. The fines are very small compared to what they're making. It might make them unhappy with the NFL, but then they're like, whatever, we'll just pay the fine and get on with life. So, I don't have a problem with that, like some people may be. I don't really have a huge take on it either way. But I think it's okay. I will say this, when you're talking about penalties in games, penalties, can change the outcome of the game considerably sometimes. And I know the Packers have, it's like, oh, the Packers could have won a few of their games, if they didn't have these killer penalties at the end of the game, that some of them were questionable and all this stuff. You know what? The Packers have not deserved to win any of their last 4 games that they have lost straight. And, sorry, they haven't lost 4 straight, but of any of their 4 games that they lost, they may have lost 4 straight. They lost 3 straight. No, they did lose 4 straight because they lost to the Lions, the Raiders, the Broncos, now the Vikings. So I'm thinking they're 2-4. They're actually 2-5. At any rate, yeah, it's just Yeah, the Packers have not deserved to win any of these last few games, so I don't think the penalties really matter. Obviously, in the big game, like the Super Bowl last year, that big controversial penalty, I don't have a problem with that really. It's just the way it's gonna be. And the thing is, if when refs are calling lots of penalties, then it feels like, well, maybe they're biased one way or the other. You know what? If the penalties, if you can look at the replay, the penalties are legit. It doesn't matter if one team has more penalties than the other. That just means they're being penalized more. And the Packers are just making more mistakes. They're just being penalized more. It's not the refs' fault. It's the Packers' fault. They got to be better. And at least in that context, yeah, it's just not been good for the Packers. And I don't mind the NFL cracking down with adding a bunch of these fines. The fines on plays that are not flagged are a little bit suspect because it's like if you're not going to flag it in game, it probably really shouldn't be fined. You got to see it in game, I'd say. Probably. Maybe that's going a little too far. But that's kind of beside the point as far as the Packers. The penalties is a major issue, and they got to clean it up. And that's one of many mistakes here. They've been starting really slow. They've had penalties all three phases. They've had penalties. They committed a season high 11 penalties, so I guess they haven't had that many before. I feel like they have had 10 before though. Um, they've had lots of drops. The defense can't get off the field in major situations. Their red zone, at least in this game, the red zone offense has actually been good in other games. It's just that they never get to the red zone the first half, and then the second half they get into the red zone, and they would actually be okay in the red zone. Not in this game. They were 1 for 4 in the red zone against the Vikings, and they could not stop the Vikings' big three, if you can call it that, without Justin Jefferson. KJ Osborne, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson, they got absolutely torched by those guys. They combined to catch 21 passes for 269 yards and a touchdown, and were targeted 27 times. So, that's pretty crazy if you just have a quarterback pass for that many yards in one game. And also, they haven't had a run game. Their top two receivers, Watson and Dobbs, along with all the other receivers, have really struggled, especially in this game. And the run game has never worked. Aaron Jones, you'd think would be pretty healthy. He's still been non-existent. He's been pretty good when he's on the field, but they have not been using him very much. On third and fourth down, they were not good on offense, which is really a product of just facing a lot of third and longs, and it's obvious passing situations, and they've really struggled in that area, and running the ball too, I guess. And they also really struggled to stop the Vikings on third downs, especially on defense. Just going along with the fact that the defense wasn't getting off the field, I believe the Vikings were 10 for 18 on third downs, and some of those were at the end of the game when Kirk Cousins tore his Achilles in that game and was ruled out. Jaron Hall was stopped quite a few times then towards the end of the game, after he came in. Before that, the Vikings were converting almost every third down. It certainly seemed like it. And, yeah, it was rough. So, let me see here. That went a little bit long talking about the penalties and fines for sure. Didn't prepare the best for that, probably. Packers did. They blocked the field goal on special teams. They did recover a fumble on defense. I for some reason cannot remember the play that was that the fumble was on, but they did recover a fumble. I can't remember if there were any other turnovers or not. The defense made a little bit more of an impact, but still were not enough, and it falls a lot on the offense too. The run defense was really good for once. That was fantastic. But it just was not good situationally on defense. And yeah, kind of just that's a big part of the game. They got to be good situationally. That's always been a problem for the defense, and it's definitely a problem when you don't have an offense. So we'll talk about Jordan Love and where to place blame and that sort of thing next time. I could talk about that this time as well for sure, but I think we'll wait until we get the guest on the show, hopefully, and I can talk Jordan Love and talk kind of in detail about that. It's possible that will be a bonus episode. I don't know. It'll get pretty long if I'm giving my reactions for their next game, as well as talking about Jordan Love and just giving kind of a progress report on the season. So we'll see where we go with that. Their next game is against the Rams at Lambeau Field at 1 o'clock Eastern, 12 Central, next Sunday, November 5th. And if Packers play like they have been, I expect a loss for sure. Rams defense is not great, but they will be good enough to stop the Packers offense unless they figure something out drastically by next game. One big piece of news, Rashawn Gary signed a 4-year, $107 million extension with the Packers. He was very grateful for that, I think, and he seems like a great kind of guy to have around Green Bay for the next 4 years. Very excited, happy for him, and happy for the Packers that they secured this amazing player. Yeah, so I guess we will go into my players of the game to close out everything here. Pretty much it was more of the same overall. I will say this, I do not think it is all Jordan Love's fault. I don't think it's all Matt LaFleur's fault, although I think more of the blame maybe falls on him. The receivers have been dropping passes. It's definitely not all Love's fault, and to be honest, he is one of my players of the game here on offense. Here is why. If you look at his PFF grades, or grade for this game, he, let me see here, he had an adjusted completion percentage of 70%, which is pretty good. That's adjusting for drops. If the receivers would have caught every pass, he would have been completing 70% of his passes, which is a really good completion percentage. He was under pressure, 13 of 49 dropbacks. He was effective when blitzed. And I like that. I like that because he's going to be under pressure a lot this year, whether he's blitzed or not, because the offensive line has struggled at some point. I think it was a little bit better this game, but he was still being pressured a lot, was sacked a few times, forced to hold the ball too long. Some of it was on him, some of it on the receivers not separating, some of it on the offensive line not blocking. So many different things going wrong, and it is a lot of problems that need to be fixed. And that's probably why we're not seeing a ton of progress right now. I do expect it to get better. It's just a matter of when it will get better, but there is no way. I don't think Matt LaFleur is that bad of a coach that he's going to continue to bring this team out like this every single game of the year, and they're not going to be any better than this. I really don't think they're going to be. I think the players are going to want to play. They just embarrassed themselves against the Vikings, division matchup, and the Vikings lost Kirk Cousins at the end of the game. They already don't have Justin Jefferson. They weren't that great even when they had Justin Jefferson, and yeah, kind of an embarrassing loss against a division opponent like that. And so they're going to come back ready to play. It might not be next game, might not be the game after that. I think there will be some improvement, especially on the front of the quarterback here. We'll say this: I've been listening to Colin Cowherd. He's been just ripping Jordan Love. And here's the deal: not that I have the platform to call Colin Cowherd out, but that's all right. He won't be listening to this podcast anyway. You're obviously not even watching all the film from Jordan Love. Every time he has a guest on the show that actually looks at the film, they're like, you know what, Jordan Love, he's not getting much help, and his wide receivers are dropping passes. You might say he has a better supporting cast than some of these younger rookies that are just coming in here and doing pretty good, like C.J. Stroud. But you know what? I don't think C.J. Stroud's supporting cast is dropping as many passes or making quite as many mistakes as these Packers receivers are. And it's just not good. Even Aaron Jones had a drop pass in this game. I think he's just nitpicking the bad plays. He's been off on Jordan Love this whole time. Didn't think he was ever the real deal, and he said that himself on the show. He's like, "Yeah, I didn't think Jordan Love was ever gonna be the real deal." Just as soon as he came in, they're talking about being patient with him. Yeah, this is his first year. It takes time. We gotta relax, as Rodgers said at one point in his career, and it's very true, especially right now. I think he kind of reiterated that on the Pat McAfee show. He's been telling Packers fans, just calm down and trust Jordan Love. You know what? I agree with that take right there. I'm not saying Jordan Love's going to be Aaron Rodgers or Brett Favre. I realize Cowherd's trying to call out those type of fans the most. I get that, but I also don't think he's going to be trash in this league like Cowherd seems to think he will be. So, yeah, it's just, I think Cowherd's nitpicking the bad plays, and yeah, there are some bad plays. There's always room for improvement. I about guarantee you C.J. Stroud has been making a good many bad plays. It's just the good has been overruling the bad, and I think that would be the same case here if the receivers would actually catch the passes. So, Jordan Love is one of my players of the game. For that reason, I think he would have been pretty good without all the drop passes. Certainly, he missed some passes. It was not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that he was pretty good. He did enough to help them win this game if his supporting cast does what they need to do. And that's really what it's been. It's been one player messes up on this play, and the next player messes up on the next play. It's just a vicious cycle. It's not been good. I will put Elton Jenkins, the left guard, in here. He was great pass blocking. His best pass blocking grade of the season. It's fantastic. We need more Elton Jenkins. He needs to anchor that left guard spot and help whoever's out at left tackle because Rasheed Walker's been struggling. It's not all been his fault either, but he has been struggling, as have some of the other offensive linemen as well. And so yeah, it's been rough. But Elton Jenkins was a bright spot in this game, and Zach Tom is another lineman there at right tackle who has been pretty good all season. He's probably been their best overall offensive lineman throughout the season, so far this season. So, yeah, Elton Jenkins, number 2. Number 3, I'm going to have to go with Dontavian Wicks. I haven't talked about him a lot on this show, but I've been, watching him. He gives great effort, run blocking, and he's been gaining consistent separation. He's been separating better than any other receiver. Yes, even better than Watson and Dobbs. It's especially Watson. I don't understand how he's not making an impact right now. It's somewhat concerning that we have not seen anything. The only big play so far this year was on a blown coverage. We've not seen any flashes of the speed that we've seen before from Watson. He's been dropping passes. He's not been getting up and mossing people like he was before. The only person who's really come down with any contested catches to speak of is Romeo Dobbs and maybe one or two to Jaden Reed, although Jaden Reed in this game had, just another good thing to say about Love. Love's interception was not on him. That was Jaden Reed's fault. Love threw it perfectly. Granted, it was a contested situation, but Jaden Reed hit him right in the hands. He had it in his hands. It was right there. Should have been able to catch it, and then he just, the defender was right there, and he's like, oh, here, you can have the ball, and just hands it to the defender, pretty much. And ended up being a big return on that play, too. Just killer mistakes like that. Wicks did have a drop in this game, like every other receiver, so he's still, that pretty much cancels out if we're, not that you can drop the ball, but if everyone else is dropping it, it's not quite as big of a deal whenever you're making more plays otherwise. Caught 2 passes and was great as a run blocker. They need to give him more opportunity because he's looked good this year. He did have one of his catches was a diving catch that Love made an amazing throw as he was going down. He just sidearm slinged it to Dontavian Wicks, who made a diving grab. It was pretty impressive. That was probably the play of the game, at least on offense. On defense, number 1 is by far Preston Smith. He produced 5 pressures, 2 sacks, 2 quarterback hits. The 2 sacks might have been the only sacks they had in the game. Actually, no, Kenny Clark had one, I believe, too. And, we had a really nice game from Preston Smith. He broke up a pass and forced a fumble, too. That Wyatt picked up. Devontae Wyatt, who's my number 2 player, or number 3 player of the game, if I'm putting them in order. Really great games from some guys up there in the defensive front. Preston Smith looked like the veteran, the steady presence out there. He was fantastic, had an elite PFF grade. Devontae Wyatt, 3 pressures, a run stop, fumble recovery. TJ Slayton is the next guy up here. He looked dominant against the run. 7 stops against the run, career high. He was great. He was always in the backfield. It seems like he's been not always really consistent, not consistently dominant, but whenever he's on, he is on, and he is unstoppable. I was listening to the radio broadcast, Wayne Larrivee, Larry McCarron. They do a great job. Great radio commentators for sure, and I believe Larry McCarron said he plays, he's an all-pro whenever he's on. Whenever he is at his best, whenever he wants to, he can just do whatever he wants, and he played at an all-pro level in this game. Heard a lot of TJ Slayton and listening to that game as I was not able to watch it, but consistently in the backfield, stopping the run especially. So that is it from our players of the game. That's it for this episode. Got a little long for what it was. Next week will be another long episode, but hopefully a little more interesting than this one, and I'm excited for that. Hopefully we can make it happen. And so that is it for today's episode, I guess. Check out the Q&As and the polls. Be sure to remember to send in your voice messages, questions, and topics you want us to discuss next week on the Jordan Love Show. And I guess that will be all for today. I will talk to you next week.